Now, the award-winning true crime podcast Trace captivated audiences right across Australia and around the world, uncovering new evidence in the unsolved murder of Melbourne woman Maria James.
Now the journalist behind the podcast, the ABC's Rachael Brown, has written a book telling the story of that cold case investigation. And Rachael joins us in the studio. Rachael, good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see you
Thanks
again.
for having me.
What a journey all of this has been. If you took us back to the very beginning, when it's sort of not to the beginning of the case, because of course that goes back decades, but to the spark in your mind, how long are we talking?
Oh, the start of 2016. So a colleague and friend who you know, Kerry Ritchie, had told me about an electrician who was seen covered in blood. I could never reconcile with Father Bongiorno being ruled out as a suspect in 2015. So that piqued my interest, and then I met with Mark James and said, I think there's some work that we can do here, and he very graciously said, well, this might be my last shot, so no pressure.
And there was a fair bit of pressure on you and I guess some reluctance from the brothers initially to link up with you. How hard was it to get them on side to proceed with this?
They were all in, because after all the stories over all the years, they still hadn't managed to find the person with that missing puzzle piece. So I saw a podcast as a beautiful medium of tapping into community grapevines to hopefully find that person that's holding that missing puzzle piece.
Yes, because the public was a key part of this.
Crucial.
And I know that was a key part of the pitch to the ABC to get us along the line to actually support this podcast, was that it'll be the audience. It will be people who don't even know what they know listening to this podcast who might provide the puzzle pieces.
And that was a really beautiful thing about Trace. And Trace is a really dark story and a sad story, but there's a lot of hope and warmth in there as well, and a lot of that hope comes from not only the people in this story and how they play the cards that they've been dealt and how they've triumphed over adversity, but also hope and warmth from the audience. We saw a phenomenal outpouring, not only of support, you know, offers of help for the family, be it legal or offers to help set up a memorial service for Maria James, but that emotional investment created this rallying, like an enormous audience mobilisation, which I don't think we've ever seen before, with new leads. And we've started to uncover history, and we might just change history. And a lot of that is thanks to listeners.
Thanks to listeners, and the book takes us basically up to date as to where the investigation is, Rachael. I think just in the last month or so, new forensic evidence emerging about a pillow that Maria James used. So what happens next? I mean, all eyes turn to the state coroner, of course. Exactly.
There's been a jurisdictional stalemate, as you know, as to who should decide whether to reopen this case, the state coroner or the Supreme Court. The ball is definitely back in the coroner's hands now. Not long ago, the Attorney General ruled that he introduced new laws into Parliament that gives the coroner more or less ambiguity to deal with historical cases. So now I'm waiting for the coroner to decide whether she'll go ahead with a fresh inquest.
There's always been a huge appetite for crime stories and true crime, going all the way back to Dashiell Hammett and all the great writers in the New York papers at the turn of the century. But there's something, you know, even more going on now, particularly with podcasts. As a journalist, as someone who wants to get to the truth, is it difficult for you to reconcile that part of the mission with the fact that there is a huge appetite and, let's admit it, probably a prurient interest in looking at the gory details of these crime stories?
And I said to you a year ago that was going to be my number one caveat, not letting Trace slide into the entertainment category, which I don't think it has. I understand there's a ravenous appetite for true crime out there, and I think that taps into people's most primal emotion, which is fear. What makes people tick? What makes them snap? What makes someone a monster? Am I capable of being a monster? And the true crime writer Ian Rankin, the author, said that true crime gives readers a chance to stand at the shoulders of monsters, but in a safe environment. So I think that's why people are so attracted to true crime. But we do, as podcasters, as authors, have to be careful and remember that at the heart of all these stories are families who are living through this very real pain.
Amazing read, Rachael, and as you say, we wait to see what, if anything, the Victorian coroner decides about Maria James's death.
Thanks for joining us today, Rachael.
Me.
Thanks so much.